In Russia's latest strikes on Ukraine, at least 6 people were killed and nearly 100 more injured when rockets hit a residential building in the city of Kharkiv near the Russian border. The strikes came as Ukraine's defense minister visited Washington, meeting at the Pentagon as well as the White House, petitioning administration officials for the right to target various high-level assets inside of Russia with U.S.-made weapons. I spoke with Ukraine's defense minister, Rustem Umerov, yesterday about his meetings here in Washington, and he talked about the Ukrainian military's needs right now. Take a listen.
We provided this situation on the battlefield. We have explained the needs. We have explained what kind of capabilities we need to protect the citizens against the Russian terror that Russians are causing us. So I hope we were heard. Our partners should understand that we're protecting our land. We're protecting people against the violation of Russian Federation, who is launching the missiles towards the cities, towards the civilian objects. And that's why we want to protect them to hit the legitimate military targets.
Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He is the former Director of European Affairs at the National Security Council. Colonel Vindman, thanks so much for joining us at a really interesting moment in this conflict. You have these Ukrainian officials coming all the way to Washington to make the case to use these long-range American missiles deep inside Russia, but they're facing American resistance. Why?
Thanks for having me on, Alex. I think the fact is that the only way oftentimes issues move are through principal engagements. So Zelensky with President Biden, Secretary of Defense to Minister of Defense, he's having a whole host of meetings. He's not just meeting with our Secretary of Defense. And they're trying to make a case as to why Ukraine should be able to employ weapons that are under its sovereign control. When we give something to a country, it's no longer a U.S. weapon be employed against whatever adversary has been fought, but it's a sovereign weapon of Ukraine. And there is no real risk of those weapons, the blowback from the employment of those weapons falling back on the U.S. I mean, the case that somehow Russia would lash out at NATO or the U.S. because Ukraine employed weapons to strike military targets is pretty darn flimsy. One of the most powerful, it's strange to call out a meme, one of the most strange and kind of impactful memes I've seen is the no-fly zone that is Russia being enforced by the U.S. and the West by our limitations on what they can do with the weapons that are in their possession, now sovereign weapons of Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are trying to make that case, are trying to lift these remaining prohibitions that the U.S. has, and trying to see what other support they can get with a window that might be closing in a lot of ways. Funding lapses on September 30th with a fiscal year. The $60 billion that are appropriated should run through the end of this year, but a lot of that is in flux and less predictable, especially since we don't know what the next administration is going to be. So they're pushing really hard for support now.
Right. Defense Minister Umerov told me that they want to go after airfields with these long-range missiles known as ATACMS. He said the administration is still analyzing this list of targets. We've also heard U.S. officials saying that those ATACMS would be better used elsewhere, say in Crimea or in Russian-occupied Ukraine. So this is really a difference in terms of the strategy, right?
Well, it's not. It's actually a bit of politics, frankly, and kind of sleight of hand. I would have to say by elements of the Biden national security team that are trying to make the case that F-16s won't make a difference, ATACMS won't make a difference, as they did to restrict ATACMS in the first place late last year and early this year. The fact is that they will make a difference. They'll have an impact. The idea is that the Ukrainians will be able to employ them against airfields housing these bombers that are launching these glide bombs from 60, 70 kilometers away to devastating effect, including the strike that they had on Kharkiv. It would force the Russians to draw those aircraft further back, degrading the amount of time that they're actually flying in support of Russian military operations. The ability to use F-16s with long-range weapons inside Russia will force those bombers even further back, or potentially neutralize Russia's capability to strike out with this weapon that really the Ukrainians don't have an answer to right now. So I think it's a bunch of, frankly, I'm just going to say it's a bunch of nonsense. These weapons would make a difference. We should lift this restriction. We should not enforce a no-fly zone over Russia. The Biden administration, in its waning days, months left in term, should make a bold decision, but a correct decision to support Ukraine properly.